Thank you for joining me for another episode of Empower Apps. I'm your host, Leo Dion. Joining us again is Antoine Vanderlee. Hey, Antoine, thanks for coming back.
Yeah, glad to be back.
So I've actually worked on projects that were written in Swift 1. And in the last year or two, have you worked on any of those?
Yeah,
lately?
I think I was kind of honored to be at WWDC when Swift was announced. And, you're enthusiastic when it's announced. But if you're there, I guess you're even more enthusiastic to get started with it because you're there in that week. You have your MacBook open all the time and you try out new things. And yeah, I was at a point where I had to convince kind of my product manager to rewrite the project or not. So yeah, I knew at that point Swift was the future, so I had a really good statement to make there. And I convinced them, and we started writing the project in Swift 1.1, which was kind of like the first really public version you could use, I guess.
Yes.
If I recall correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we started using that in the first week, 2 weeks. It was all fine, and it worked nicely, and we continued, and the project grew. And then we realized that, what is it called again? Incremental builds. Sorry, I couldn't get to the word. But, we didn't have incremental building at the time, which meant that the project builds times were like 8 minutes, 9 minutes at a certain point, just for a really small change. It didn't work at all. Up until, I think, Swift 2 introduced incremental building, which was a lot better already.
Okay.
But yeah, then Swift 3 arrived, which was great. But for existing projects, it was definitely not great. I'm not sure if you experienced the same, but we had to rewrite a lot of code.
Yes.
Because the syntax.
1 to 2 was a big rewrite, but 2 to 3, I think, was an even bigger rewrite from what I remember.
Yeah. Not even mentioning all the best practices that arrived with the new changes, So I never regretted the fact that we went for Swift because we were in a much better place than if we would have started writing it in Objective-C, but it wasn't easy as well.
Yeah. So I've been on a few projects actually in the last year or two that were written in Swift 3. And I had to add features or fix bugs from Swift 3. And that was an interesting experience because I ended up having to set up a High Sierra VM and install Xcode 8, but I also had to change the calendar date because the certificate wouldn't work on Xcode 8. And then I had to upgrade the project to 4 on the VM. And then I ended up being able to open it on my actual machine and then upgrade it from 4 to 5. And there was like all sorts of cruft in the code of like no generics, no try catch. And it was like, it was an interesting experience I didn't upgrade it wholesale. I just wanted to fix the bugs and get the features in, but it was interesting if like just being able to like dance around it, I guess, and not change too much of the old code that worked while also using new methodologies, like a lot of like NS array and NS dictionary and stuff. I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy.
Yeah, but it's the same when you have to work on a project that's still using Objective-C, like it's even though you might still know the syntax, you have a small moment where you need to switch your mindset again.
Right.
I think the same happens right now with Swift UI. We started adopting Swift UI in the WeTransfer app lately, and it's a whole different mindset. And once you start writing those Swift UI views, you need to get started a bit. But once you're in there, it goes pretty well. Once you know the syntax a bit. But at a certain point, you need to get back to UIKit code. And then you're like, damn, I need to write so many code for this simple view, Yeah, it's an interesting switch you have to do all the time.
Now, how are you switching over to Swift UI at WeTransfer? You're doing it like piecemeal, I guess?
Well, what we decided to do is really look into like a place where we can adopt Swift UI while still maintaining support for iOS 12, because we still support iOS 12 and Swift UI only arrived in iOS 13. So that was the first decision we made before we decided which view or which part of the app we wanted to rewrite. And our designers dropped us a new introduction screen just because it probably worked better. So we had to implement that. And this was like a coincidence because we also wanted to adopt SwiftUI at that point. So we decided to build those views with SwiftUI while keeping the old introduction screens available for iOS 12 users. Kind of an easy approach. It's like a distinct piece of the project which we could simply rewrite while almost not touching the old code. We kind of created an in-between business layer which contained all the logic like opening the sign-up page, opening the login page, basically methods like sign-in button tapped, which we could call from the old introduction screen and from the new SwiftUI introduction screens. And with that, we started with full confidence on building the SwiftUI views. We wrote a blog post about this with all our learnings, which we can share in the show notes later. But if I would make the decision today, I think I would even drop the new introduction screens for iOS 13, because the thing is, once SwiftUI arrived, it was iOS 13, obviously, so we can, in theory, use SwiftUI from iOS 13. But it was early days, and there were so many bugs still in there. And if you decide to use SwiftUI with iOS 13, you still have to deal with those bugs, even though they might be fixed now. So we ended up...
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, so we ended up fixing a lot of bugs just for those iOS versions, which still have quite a few users on it, So yeah, it's a tough decision. I think if we would write like new views today, which are quite simple, because our introduction screens sound simple, but they had a lot of animations so that didn't really make it.
Is it like an onboarding essentially?
Yeah, it's an onboarding, but the designers weren't limited. We always say just create the best view possible, and we will see what we can do.
Okay.
And yeah, we didn't regret it, but it was a challenge, especially with SwiftUI. But it turned out great. But yeah, 80%.
How does it work on 14?
Yeah, so 14 was much better, but 14.1 broke another thing. So
oh boy,
it's still not really stable. But I guess it really depends how complicated your views are. If you use like custom alignment guides, for example, then it's a lot more complicated. Geometry readers, if you don't all use those things, then it can be really simple.
Yeah. You need a doctorate to understand geometry reader, I think. It could be
it's so hard to get your head around it. Yeah, I'd be struggling with that one as well, but yeah, it's pretty useful in some cases, even in a kind of hacky way sometimes. But
right.
Yeah.
So is the idea then in like next year, you're just going to get rid of the UI kit code since you're not going to support 12 next year, probably?
Well, I guess at least new views, once we have the opportunity to rewrite a view just because the design is so different, then we would definitely think about rewriting it in SwiftUI, just because we know for sure that one day we want to rewrite it into SwiftUI. So if we do it today, we make our lives a bit easier for the future selves,
Right.
But then still it depends, because if it's a really complicated view tangled into a lot of business logic we have in place already, then it might not be the best decision to do. For example, if you have a UI collection view with a lot of UI collection view cells in it, you don't want to rewrite that one cell into SwiftUI, because performance-wise, that might not be the best approach. You rather want to rewrite that whole view, all cells, all together with the header, the footers, and so on in SwiftUI instead.
And the other thing you got to think about is like, even though you might have a collection view is a great example, it's only in 14 that we have something like a collection view in SwiftUI. So if you're still supporting 13, you can't really like bring in a HGrid or VGrid or any of that stuff. Yeah,
exactly. And yeah, you can still decide to rewrite that view for iOS 14 users only, but especially if you have a large user base, the Collector has multiple of millions of users. In that case, an adoption of 8% is still like a lot of users. So it's hard to sell that to your product manager that, hey, that new view will only be available for 90% of the users, because it's still a big percentage you left without the new views. Yeah.
And if you're like an indie developer, you don't have to care about that stuff too much. But if you're starting something new, but yeah, if you're a product company, that's where it can become a real big issue.
Yeah, it's also like a timely decision. Like today you have an adoption on iOS 13, but in a year that's probably gone. So it's also thinking about the future for yourself. If you're an indie developer, you likely want to do the development in SwiftUI just to make it easier for yourself, and care a bit less about that lower adoption rate.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's my opinion how I would look at it, because as an indie developer, your time is really valuable, and you might not have the time to really maintain old views as well. So
yeah. Recently, I've dealt with an issue on the watch where there's like a weird archiving issue with watch apps for 32-bit watches. It essentially crashed on watchOS 6 on 32-bit because of the way archiving was set up, and I had to figure out a specific build flag for it. And it's like, now I'm like, is it really worth supporting watchOS 6? Like, yeah, I'm not so sure about that. And so yeah, I'm facing that same conundrum myself.
Yeah, you can only spend your time once, so you need to be careful with your decisions.
Yeah, exactly. Hey folks, I wanted to talk to you again about App Figures. You probably already know them about their analytics and their App Store optimization. App Figures really is about giving app makers the tools they need to get more downloads and revenue. Well, now App Figures can help you track competitors, from how many downloads they're getting and how much money they're making, to their audience demographics and which SDKs they use. Their competitor intelligence really gives you great context. Say a competitor adds like a new feature or was mentioned in the news recently. With App Figures, you can see if that brought in more downloads right away. Got a great idea for an app or a game? Well, with App Figures, you can figure out how big that market is and how much money you could be making with it. And that's just scratching the surface. Whether you're growing your app or building a new one, App Figures has the tools you need that will reduce the risk, but also get you more downloads. You don't need a large budget or a data science degree to do this kind of thing. App Figures has made it affordable and simple. On top of tools, App Figures also provides a lot of great guides and tutorials to take you step by step through gaining more visibility with ASO and increasing your revenue by learning from your competitors. They just released a free guide on that, actually. So go ahead, head to the link in the show notes and try App Figures for free. If you like it, use our special code EMPOWER3030 to get 30% off for the next 3 months. Thank you, App Figures, for sponsoring our show. Now, going back to that onboarding, now, what's your plan as far as like transitioning out of the UI kit portion of that onboarding thing once you stop supporting iOS 12?
Yeah, the introduction screens, it took a lot of time, but they are now really stable on all iOS 13 versions and iOS 14. So we're kind of in a place where we were able to just keep on supporting iOS 13 for as long as we want. But as soon as we drop iOS 12, we obviously remove and delete the old logic and the old code. And yeah.
Do you use any Swift attributes to deprecate parts of your code so that way developers understand, don't use this, or if you do use it, understand it's going to be going away very soon? Or like, how do you deal with that kind of stuff?
Yeah, we have two ways of doing that. Sometimes deprecation warnings, indeed, but that's more for like logic that you're likely to reuse on multiple places. Whereas calling the old introduction screens, that's not really something you would do at multiple places. So a deprecation warning wouldn't really help a lot there.
Right.
But what you can do is you can be smart with the availability APIs and throw a warning. Yeah, you know that hashtag warning syntax you can use to create project warnings for yourself. That's often something we like to do. But I guess if you use the availability APIs and you start dropping a certain version, you can just search on that availability API and basically remove all the code that's in the else statement.
Right.
That's basically the approach we use now. And there's a few places in our code which is kind of like the generic business logic. I think we just adopted different data sources, and we have some old implementation for iOS 12 to support reloading cells in a fetch results controller. It's quite detailed, but I know that we use a deprecation warning right there, just because we use it in multiple views, and that way we automatically get like warnings on several places, and we know where to update it. So yeah, it's a case by case thing.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So over the summer after WWDC, you wrote actually some really good blog posts on logging and dealing with bugs and things like that. I'm not super familiar with, and I don't know if a lot of people are really familiar with how OS log works, but maybe can you explain briefly why folks should be using OS log over just debug print or print?
Yeah, so honestly, if I write my own projects, I don't really set up OS log because it feels like a bigger step to take than just using print. But if you're really looking carefully on what are the benefits of using OS log, there are a few. And I didn't really look into the latest features regarding it, but I know for sure that you can use the console app, for example, to read out logs,
Okay.
which can be useful in certain debug sessions. And other than that, it's more performant than prints, and it's probably not something we will encounter that fast in regular applications when using prints. But yeah, if you have to decide anyway, then you can maybe just use OSLog instead. And within the collector, we created our own kind of like convenient class with categories, so we can really like filter out on certain categories when we run our code and we log out print statements, which makes it kind of like a more convenient way. And at the time, I think we started trying out Coco Lumberjack. I was really in favor of using it because I was just used to it. But we really didn't want to add another third-party dependency, which is why we decided to use OSLog, which is kind of like the native available API, similar to Coco Lumberjack, where you also have those log levels in place. So yeah, I guess that's how we look at it.
Now, how can you find your specific app logs within console?
Yeah, so you have to filter out based on your bundle identifier, and then you can also filter out on the certain log levels, so on like the error level or the debug level, and that way you will only get the print statements of that, the things you really want to see.
And this is available Mac OS, iOS, Watch OS, pretty much anywhere you can filter. You can pull these logs up in the console.
Yeah, as far as I know it is. And there are even like further steps you can take. I think connecting like a device, say a colleague in the office has a certain issue on their device, and I think it's even possible to read out certain logs through the console app by just connecting the USB connector. I really didn't use that often. Yeah, that's maybe interesting to point out as well. We created a framework called Diagnostics, which collects all the log statements in your app, and it allows users with an issue to just press a button in your app, and it opens the mail composer with an attachment. And in the attachment file, you have a whole diagnostics report, including user defaults, core data, specific data if required, all the log statements, any crashes that occurred. It's a pretty nice format in an HTML file with like an HTML menu as well. So we often get report from real users that press the send feedback button, and it gets reported through our support team. And we get a lot of details about that user already based on the log statements we have in place. So yeah, I guess that took away reasons for us to use the console app nowadays. But yeah, it's still possible.
Yeah, that's awesome. The other blog post I want to talk about is one from last December about your 4 tips to make it easier to fix crashes and bugs. Because I know, like, if you're updating an app, especially when we have an app that, we found out it doesn't work in iOS 14, can you figure it out? Like, and I've had those before. What have you found is like some successful ways of figuring out where those bugs are coming from or how those crashes are happening?
Yeah, so actually in the blog post, I also talk about diagnostics. So that's maybe a pretty interesting entrance point for users for listeners that want to know more. If I look at how we solve crashes nowadays, there are a few steps I take. We're using Firebase crash reporting, but tools like Instabug do the same, where when you get like the last analytics events before a crash occurred, and that already points you in the right direction. Then there's also device statistics. So is it happening on iOS 12 only? Sometimes that happens. Or is it happening on an iPad only? That can really point you in a certain direction too. And then I start to look into the code. Like, can I, based on theory, see what happened there? And if not, I try to reproduce it in the app itself. And then sometimes it's very easy to reproduce it. And I can start writing a unit test that reproduces that crash because I want to make sure that that crash doesn't occur again. So I
Right.
want to
Yeah,
build in a
exactly.
unit test for it. But sometimes it even happened today, this morning. I explained to our QA engineers, we have a whole team of testing people that run like smoke tests every now and then. And I asked them like, hey, I got a crash related to receiving transfers. It should be around there. Any of those fields, did you happen to have a crash when you were downloading content? And sometimes they can tell me, yeah, I coincidentally had that and I had to do this and this and this. But sometimes they didn't, and they will start testing themselves and try to see if they can find it in a certain way by doing all kind of like edge cases. But yeah, that's basically the approach we take to solve it. And once we solve the crash, that's important too. In all those crash reporting tools, even in Xcode itself, you can mark a crash as fixed. And that way you will tell the tool like, hey, whenever this crash occurred again, show me a notification and let me know, because probably didn't fix it yet. So I have to take a look again.
Awesome. And we'll have a link to both those blog posts in our show notes. Before we close out, we both will be at a conference coming up soon, as much as one can be at a conference in 2020. We'll both be speaking at NSSpain. What are you going to be speaking on?
Yeah, so lately I've been writing a lot of blog posts around core data, which is kind of like the way I prepare for my talks. I try to combine my time preparing the presentation by writing about the same.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah, so what I'll be speaking about is core data best practices. And, I took kind of like a benefit from the fact that we need to pre-record it. So I decided to make fun out of it and without giving away too much. But I'll be not alone in the presentation. I'll be speaking together with somebody else. And I also decided to really go deep and create some custom introduction screens, do some things with audio. I had the chance to combine a few of my previous hobbies, which is video editing and audio editing, into creating an awesome recording. So
yes,
you make it really hard to concentrate now, So
sorry,
for listeners,
I'm
looking at like a futuristic. Okay.
Spoilers.
Because
my talk is Swift package management, dependency management of the future. So I spent a few bucks on what I'm wearing right now. So I won't spoil it, but if you attend NSSpain, you'll check me out in this cool pair of.
You don't want to miss this.
Yeah.
Super cool.
Apparently, it has a lot of buttons. There we go. Okay.
But this is so nice. It's so aligned with the house style. I'm not giving away too much, but I get what you're doing here.
Yeah. So so this will be my 10th talk this year.
This year?
Yeah. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
And I think 2 of them were in person.
Yeah.
All the rest obviously are video. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about it. It seems like I'm excited to talk about Swift packages. And like you said, it aligns with a lot of my other talks because they all have to do something with Swift packages. So it's kind of a good cap to the end of the year, I guess, or good capper. But I'm really excited to talk about that. It's funny you're talking about core data. There seems to be a big, I think Donny has wrote a few posts on core data as well. And we did an episode recently with Aaron from Automatic about core data, but there seems to be a big research, I guess, and interest in core data, which is really interesting.
Yeah, Donny is a big friend of me. He's also from the Netherlands, and we often speak about core data. He's writing a new book on it, which is really interesting.
Is it? It's practical core data, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So that promises to be a really good way of starting with core data if you didn't do that yet. But I think over time core data really improved, especially in the early days of Swift and stuff. Core data wasn't really particularly good. But things like the NS persistent container, persistent history tracking, those really solved a few big problems in core data we had at the time. And nowadays it's much more convenient to use, I guess. The only thing I really hoped for during this WWDC, and I guess I'll do that next year again, is more like a Swift version of it. We still have to interpolate with a lot with Objective-C code, which isn't really nice. But
I've actually looked at a couple of, maybe offline I'll send you some libraries I've looked at for doing core data in a Swifty way, because I just hate dealing with XD object model files and all that stuff, especially going back, especially talking about Swift packages. I'd rather have my stuff all in code and doing it that way. So maybe offline I'll send that to you, because I found some really interesting libraries that like kind of refactor that into more of a coding format, similar to how like Swift UI removes storyboards in the same way, like just being able to get that all in code.
The thing is, I've seen those libraries probably, and there's also this discussion often to use Realm, and the bad thing is, in my opinion, is that they're all third-party dependencies, and we
already talked about that with React Swift, and the issues there.
We're now talking about user data, and you take a really big risk of using a third-party dependency, especially if it turns out to be the wrong decision, where you have to migrate all the local data from a user, which comes with all kinds of risks. So I'm much rather...
That's a totally fair point. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I much rather use like a battle-tested kind of older version core data than a fancy third-party dependency, which might not work out as good as I hoped it would. So,
especially if Apple Sherlocks it, essentially, and come up with something better that actually works, which, God willing, I hope maybe 2021 we'll get core data migrated fully to Swift in some declarative way. I hope so.
I'm pretty sure they're already building something. I would be surprised if they're not.
Yeah. And if people want to watch Antoine and I speak about core data or Swift packages, you definitely want to go to NSSpain.com, use that promo code EmpowerApps to get 10% off. And it's going to be, what is it, like 36 hours of talks? So
there will be a lot of talks, yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. So you'll definitely want to check that out. Anything else you want to mention before we close out?
Well, I think if anybody wants to discuss any of the topics we discuss now and share opinions, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter or on my website through email. And I'll try to reply as soon as possible.
We'll have that info in the notes, but go ahead and I'll let you say the names. What's your website and Twitter handle? Let me try. You can find Antoine at SwiftLee.com.
No, yeah, that hurts, that hurts.
Oh, no.
No, yeah.
Evanderlee.com.
Maybe the owner of SwiftLee.com is listening and can sell it to me, because I really tried to get both SwiftLee.com and the Twitter handler SwiftLee, which is also not in my hands.
How about SwiftLee.nl, or is that available? Or I don't know how that works in the Netherlands.
I already built up name for evanderlee.com, so I'd rather go to the right destination, SwiftLee.com, or stay with evanderlee. And it's kind of the same for my Twitter handle, which is TwanNL, which is kind of odd as well. It's from the old days, but some people know it by by themselves, so I don't really want to change that easily.
I totally understand. Trust me. And then I know the Twitter handle, Twanel. Yep. TWANNL. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
I've never done the info of the guest. I've usually let the guest handle it. What am I missing? You're on GitHub as well.
I can tell you a short version or short story about my Twitter handle, because I really tried to get SwiftLee. I started to research who's the owner, So I found out the name, and I went on LinkedIn. I went on Facebook. I tried to contact him through his email. It's some kind of guy living in California. I even know somewhere where its city is, but you don't want to go too far. But I really tried to get the Twitter handle. He's not been active since 2009, and I'm like, come on, I can really use that handle. But it's so sad.
And if that gentleman happens to be listening to this podcast, come on, for Antoine, come on.
I'll give you some SwiftLee merchandise. I promise.
A SwiftLee coffee mug. Come on.
Yes.
We'll have all the info to Antoine in our show notes. Folks can find me on Twitter at LeoGDion. My company is Bright Digit. If you have any questions for us or any feedback on this episode, be sure to reach out to us. Please do give us a review in Apple Podcast and Google Podcast and Spotify. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you, Antoine, for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
See you at NSSpain.
Oh, yes, definitely.